I have to thank you all again for being here with us tonight. And there's a lot of places you could have been, but you're spending this time with us. We don't take that for granted. Um, Something that's really important for you all to know is what these two curators put into those shows outside is something that is nothing short of amazing. There was a balance between how close they kept that process, but also how they allowed it to grow and do its own thing and back and forth and back and forth. So that's what makes this gathering to talk about it, for you all to hear what those decisions were, so important. So first, I want to introduce these two amazing people. Start off with Melaine. Melaine Ferdinand-King is a Providence, Rhode Island-based scholar, curator, and multi-form creative practitioner. She holds a BA in sociology from Spelman College, the MA from Brown University, and is currently a PhD candidate in Africana Studies at Brown University. Drawing from her heritage, Melaine's practice is informed by African American thought and practice with a special focus on visual, musical, and literary cultures. Through her work as a teacher, project manager, and archivist, she hosts workshops and engages in discussions on issues of race, history, aesthetics, and ethics. In the past year, Melaine co-curated the inaugural Black Biennial at the RISD Museum, Gelman Gallery in Providence, Rhode Island, and Black Sonic Heritage as Heresy at FADA Gallery in Johannesburg, South Africa. Our curatorial projects and intellectual pursuits emphasize the importance of surreality, love, and critique in our daily lives. So please join me in welcoming Melaine Ferdinand. And to my right, we have Joel Rosario Tapia, also known as Tapia. Durewa, Taino Kai, and Chief Durewa. He is an Aboriginal urban artist of what is currently referred to as Puerto Rican descent and a cultural practitioner of Boricua. Tapia was born in Providence and served 2 tours of combat in Iraq with the U.S. Army. He is the superior, the chief of the Sibuko Bayamon Taino tribe, and an active voice and writer in the indigenous rights and Taino diaspora. His work is influenced by indigenous Taino culture and hip hop. He is a multi-hyphenate and creative director, and creative director, and was the 2021 Risk of Folks Art Fellow. Tapia practices independently and is the professional project manager at Gaona Contractors LLC. He curates urban and indigenous BIPOC-centered shows from his private gallery studio named The Art Dealers, right here in Providence. He also administers yearly indigenous Caribbean celebrations known as Areto. Tapia is an author of 2 books on his artistic body of work, Ab Origin and Kiss the Girls, and is a co-author of The Implications and Ramifications of the Artificial Black Identity, including a legal chronology of the Americas 1492 to 1968, editions 1 and 2, 2019, 2021. Tapia is also a member of Providence's Racial and Environmental Justice Committee. Please join me in welcoming Joel Rosario Tapia. Okay, so in the spirit of curating commemoration, something that we did for over a year when working together is we talked about that word a lot, curation, and what you all were going to do with it. Right, so something I want to do is let's talk about some, like, the definition of this word and what you all ended up doing with it. Oxford definition, Oxford's dictionary defines curation as the action or process of selecting, organizing, and looking after the items in a collection or exhibition. But I also want to give a more secondary and general definition from the freedictionary.com. to gather and present to the public. So, something I think is really important, and it was really important in you all's journey, were the conversations we had about things that we found to be curated outside of gallery walls. So I want to start with you, Melaine. Can you tell us about how long you lived in Providence and how this city has presented itself to you? And a follow-up question would be, in what ways do you see curation happening throughout this place you currently call home?
Thank you for that. I think it's a wonderful opening question. So I've been living in Providence going on 6 years now. And it's been a good amount of time, I think, to learn a little bit more about the culture of the city or the many different cultures that exist here. So I'd say when I first came to Providence, it was a bit difficult to enter the kind of social stratosphere that's already been cultivated. Providence, in my opinion, has not been friendly to transplants, especially those who are affiliated with Brown and RISD for a very good reason. And so in trying to learn more about the community and the folks that live here, I found myself a little bit insistent upon joining community organizations, about putting myself in alignment with the causes and the political issues that were important to me, and to actually show my authentic self to the folks that already lived here, to show that I was intentionally trying to be a meaningful member of community and not just someone who absorbs resources, extracts some of the many benefits that are usually not given to those who are native to Providence and then leave to pursue my career elsewhere. So I think when I first got here, I saw Providence as a very kind of quaint, kind of quiet city, made my assumptions, did not know what to think, honestly. But then over the past few years, I've seen it open up through an organization I originally became affiliated with called Direct Action for Rights and Equality. I'm a part of the Behind the Walls Committee. And so in doing some of the direct action work, I found that folks are incredibly politically motivated and oriented, very concerned about the rights of the people who live here, who are bold and proud of Providence, of Rhode Island, of all that New England has to offer, and extremely artsy and colorful people, which, I mean, I don't have to go in great detail to explain, which is the reason why we're all here. So Providence to me is extremely proud. It's extremely eccentric. And I would say that it's eclectic in the way that there is a variety of different people. I would say that community is not one specific thing here in Providence, which I think is something that people often get confused. A lot of times people assume community is solely just about the people that you live next to, or it's about proximity. But a lot of times I found that community shows up in the way that you show up, in the way that you kind of resurface issues, the way that you remember not to forget the people and the events and the places that either don't get as much attention or that just lack visibility for one reason or another. And so what was your third question?
In what ways do you see curation happening throughout this place you call home?
So I would say that Poiesis is a direct response to what I've seen. For me, this exhibition has been a love letter to Providence. It's my thank you to Providence for accepting someone who's not from here to tell a story about what Providence culture, at least for a segment of people, actually looks like. And so curating in Providence has occurred to me in a number of places, but specifically, and as it pertains to this exhibition, I've seen it primarily in street culture and in the community developed by a lot of Black and Brown young people. I would say young, between the ages of 16 and maybe 35. The curating is happening when it comes to the way that people are actually intentional about the decolonizing their relationships, about the ways that they speak to each other, the different ways of communicating, whether it's artistic or otherwise. So I'm thinking about the different activist groups that are intentional about redefining what love looks like, how it's not about possession and how it's not about power and it's not about permanence. It's about creating fluid spaces. It's about allowing people to come in as they are, and curating those spaces. And I use that word because I feel like curating has taken a number of different meanings and has been adopted by a lot of people, specifically those who are interested in aesthetics or those who are interested in like power or like institution building. But I'm seeing curating in just the way that folks relate, the way that folks touch, the way that they grieve, and the way that they find their own ways to create different and alternative spaces that may not need money to back them up or may not need power to actually sustain them in the ways that we know it. So a lot of the times I just see it in the relationships that people have built in mutual aid societies and those type of groups.
Thank you. Tapia, same question. I'm going to split them up. So you how long have you lived in Providence, and how has this city presented itself to you?
Good afternoon, everyone. Glad that you are
Good
here.
afternoon.
I have lived in Providence on and off all my life. So I was, I always like to say the saying, I was conceived in Puerto Rico, but born here. So my time here has been my full life experience. Yes, I've been many other places. I have lived in other states. I'm a military guy, so I've been in a lot of different places. But most of my life experiences, far as what I hold valuable and dear, really comes to me from my experiences here. So that's as long as I've been here. What was the other one?
How has this city presented itself to you?
Oh, well, at different times in my life, it's presented itself differently. So I've lived enough time here to understand what exactly happens in terms of the communities that I've had exposure to, what exactly happens, and what I can expect. And this comes along with maybe my consciousness level also, because some of the experiences that I have today, that I've experienced, are incredible, but some of these people have been here all my life. I just haven't been exposed to them. Some of these places have been here all my life. I just haven't been exposed to them. So I've come to realize that the same thing can present itself to you many different ways over the span of your experience with it. If you learn to really see it and not tie yourself up into your impression of it, because your impression of it is just momentary and it's dynamic and it's changing and it's happening. And as your life experience may get better, as you educate yourself, as you expose yourself to other cultures, other individuals, other places, then, context happens. I remember when I was a kid and I wanted a way out, and then 9/11 happened. And I said, I'm joining the army. I need out. But then after that, and going to many other places and seeing the lay of the land, seeing just how people live in other places and how everything is, I came back here and valued it in a whole different way than I ever did before. The amount of time it takes to get place to place, the narrowness of the streets, the way that in certain places it looks like a garden in the summertime, where there's a canopy that still exists because of the closeness of the streets. And also, some of the first infrastructure that had to do with vehicles was created here, based on the fact that at the turn of the century, the abundance of car manufacturers were actually here, based on the wealth being located here. So you get kind of a slice of Americana that you don't necessarily get if you're in Texas or California, and they have their own slices and their own things. But the experience that I have with Rhode Island and Providence has varied over time, but it has continued to blossom and expand. And I really value it as a rich place full of history, specifically a lot of colonial history that also are the remnants of our indigenous histories and aboriginal histories in this country, because this is one of the 13 colonies, right? This place was kind of the center of wealth in the trade of human beings. Therefore, you still find today remnants of the communities who comprise that trade, what's the word, exploited and extracted individuals from other places in the Americas and also internationally. You find here that some of those communities are the most abundant in terms of, quote, minority groups. And you also find that you find the history of America and through its wars and all of that with some of the communities here. So it's a very vibrant place. It's living. And some of what really drives all of that is stories that have never been told, that are seldom known, and that deserve to be told and deserve to have a platform. And so I kind of feel like that's what Remedy was trying to do. But that's how it's presented itself. Thanks.
Well, last thing about curation.
Okay.
All right.
How is curation?
How
Well,
did you see curation happening in Providence?
well, I see it happen in all the ways. I see it happening in the traditional institutional setting, because this is where we get the word, or we're thinking of curating and we're saying the collection of objects. But I also see it happening in our communities, how we relate to each other, because we're a collection of not objects, but communities, individuals, experiences. And so I see the way that promoters talk about the events happening in the community. I see the promotion of everything from, celebrations to athletic events. This is how I see, more practical aspect of how curating is happening in the community. And I also see the change agents, the folks that are attempting to make change in institutions and government, who are curating their communities by representing their communities and being an introduction into their communities. So I see it happening across society in a lot of different ways. It's simply that we have more of a lens to perceive people introducing their realities, and what they value here in Rhode Island. I see that happen a lot. Thanks.
Thank you. Okay. I think it's a good time to start talking about both of your visions as we moved into this. All right, so you two worked really closely with the rest of the board over a year, and in those early stages when we were laying the groundwork, you both developed your own visions for the show. Melaine, you offered us Poiesis. Tapia, you brought us Remedy. So you just kind of went into that, but I think there's some other things that are connected to your vision that I think would be amazing for us to hear. So I'll start with you, Melaine. Out of the myriad of things that you study and work on in your studies at Brown, something that sticks out and I think that has its own presence in everything you do, especially here in the work that you've allowed to grace us with, this summer, Afro-surrealism, excuse me, through the Black radical tradition, right? So that's something I think is really interesting to get into because a lot of it has to do with uncovering things. So I'm going to read a quote from D. Scott Miller's Afro-Surrealist Manifesto. He stated that Afro-Surrealists restore the cult of the past and how Afro-Surreal presupposes that beyond this visible world, there is an invisible world striving to manifest, and it's our job to uncover it. All right, so as we know, uncovering anything is a disruptive act, especially if there's a specific type of special social order that's dependent upon that entity staying covered. This form of disruption is part of the foundation of the Black radical tradition. Disruption offers the opportunity for novelty to emerge. So, Melaine, tell us about what led you to the philosophy of Poiesis, and what things have you watched emerge into existence here in Providence, or greater New England, for that matter. And conversely, were there things that you believe had not yet emerged enough for your liking?
That's fantastic. Thank you so much. I don't often get to talk about my research in surrealism, whether it be European surrealism or Afro-surrealism, but it was a great inspiration for this project. For those of you who are unfamiliar, surrealism strives to deconstruct binaries and compartmentalization, to destroy the idea that there always has to be a good versus evil, a savage versus civilized, a constant tension between rich versus poor. et cetera, the obliteration of hierarchy and difference. Or difference meaning that there must be a hierarchy in order to rank those differences. So in coming across the philosophy of poiesis, honestly, it was in one of my theory books that I was reading for research. Specifically, it was None Like Us by Stephen Best. And I was actually unfamiliar with the word. It was a word that is very new to me despite being in my doctoral studies, and it just meant the act of creation, or that interstitial space between the idea and that end product. And so it caused me to think, well, what happens in the in-between? How do we get from point A to point B? And so when I originally had selected an idea and I had presented it to a number of people, I actually had feedback from a particular individual who said, I just think this word is going to be too hard to grasp for people, and I think it's a bit inaccessible. And to me, what that meant was that you think that certain people aren't intelligent enough to learn new words. And there's always this assumption that because I am in a doctoral program that there are always things that I've always known, or there is capabilities that I've always had to kind of uncover new meaning or to translate, and that's not the case. I'm constantly learning, constantly uncovering. Study is non-permanent. And so as an individual who's constantly changing, it caused me to think, okay, well, there's this interstitial space, there's this active creation. Well, exactly what is that? Where does it happen? Where can I look out in Providence and see people constantly improvising, remixing, experimenting? And what does that look like? And then when you bring it to a project like curating commemoration, where permanence and forever is something that we strive for, is a certain human value that we strive to attain, I'm thinking, how can we actually undo this idea that to commemorate something, it must mean it must be monumental in the way that it is static or the way it's unfixed. And so I was trying to kind of turn commemoration as a term on its head and think about where are those moments where they're just flashes of brilliance, where things are actually momentary or gentrified already or painted over, or something that no longer actually exists in the ways that our memory has captured it. So to me, that's what poiesis is. And so I selected works by artists whose techniques were actually extremely experimental, or had something to do with sustainability and repurposing, reusing, or was really just about disruption in and of itself, making sure that a certain event can be troubled in the way, or good troubled, or troubled in a good way, as John Lewis would say. So that's where that came from, was thinking about how do we commemorate the fleeting, the things that still deserve to be remembered, but we may not actually have a site to go back to in order to remember them. And I'm thinking a lot about my ancestors in the African-American tradition, where we have to do a lot of critical fabulation, where we may not actually have papers and artifacts and mementos to remember our people by, or remember an event by, but nonetheless, we felt them. We remember that they were real. And just because we don't necessarily know where exactly the fabrics were, doesn't mean that they were non-real. So that was poiesis for me. That's what I tried to bring, a little bit of rethinking of the commemorative event in and of itself. And what was the second question?
Was there anything specifically that you felt had not emerged enough for you as you were going into this idea?
I wouldn't say no. I would say not necessarily it hadn't emerged enough. We've been working on this project for quite a long time from start to finish, but the idea for poiesis didn't come into fruition until around October, November. And the artist that I selected hadn't been finalized until about March of this year. So the entire process of poiesis itself was poetic, like a poetic act, where I was in the moment uncovering artists that I did not have prior relationships with. Some of them I did, about 5 to 10 people I did, but the other 25 or so artists that I had selected, most of them I'd never met before. Some of them I'd never heard before. I did a lot of grassroots scouting, Instagram, word of mouth, putting up posters around the city, call for artworks that sound like this or look like this. And for people who resonated with the idea of the kind of interstitial, the remixing of street culture, the kind of reappropriation of materials, I wanted to see who actually would come out for this show. So I think that kind of question of something that hadn't emerged yet, I think that's what I was on a quest for. And that's what the process of this exhibition was just kind of, in a way, surreal, flying off the seat of my pants, seeing who was going to come out for this idea, who's going to join me on this broader journey of figuring out what it is we're doing here, what it is that Providence artists have to say for themselves without me speaking for them. So yeah, not so much, but it came nonetheless. Yeah.
Thank you for that.
Yeah. Thank you.
All right. Tapia, in your vision, right? Something that I've seen that's pretty apparent is your own artistic expression makes its way into, I think, most of the things that you do. For instance, in your visual work, right? You give us themes like these depictions of things that may be connected with life in America or its relationship, this back and forth shift from indigeneity, right, and the problems within that. Here and in King, right?
Mhm.
So we have those things showing up. There's a layering there. The music, you even put layering there where you would take electronic sound, put in indigenous drumming, right? So there's these different sounds that show up, even in the way you approach identity, right? You talk about being multi-hyphenate, right? But then there's these different connections. So you have the sight of combinations, like the way that you move through things. So I'm wondering, when it came to you coming up with remedy, first off, can you tell us what led you there? What about this place led you to this idea of like remedy? And what combinations had you seen or experienced in life here in Providence that you think may have been in need of a remedy?
Well, first off, the first reason that the word remedy sticks out to me and always stuck out to me is because it's an alternative way of thinking about health or of thinking about treatment, thinking about healing, and it's something that is done more. I associate the idea of remedy with um, plant medicine. I associate the idea of remedy with ceremony and ritual. Um, that's the first association. But the larger scheme of it is that there's a document that's very important to myself and should be important to many, uh, many who are at a certain point in their lives that come from communities similar to mine, but that are a certain point in their lives where they understand uh, the amount of consciousness and information that they've taken in and they think they're woke. So there's a certain document called the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples. And so within this document, there are different, segments. But one of the things addressed is the three R's, which is remedy, redress, and repatriation. Remedy speaks to me about the first step. The first step has to be dialogue, and the remedy is dialogue. The remedy is actually having a conversation about what is actually happening here. I was in a meeting earlier with the Wildfire Board, and we were having a conversation, and they asked me some questions, and I had just mentioned, and I'll pretty much go right back to this. Nobody ever thinks about Canonicus or my antinomy. Like no one thinks about these folks, and so these are the grand sachems of the Nanhiganuk. The Nanhignuk is the way that the Nahagansit, Narragansett, Algonquin speaking tribes of the area govern themselves. So these two were the grand sachems of the people that were the culture that had rulership over this area. And so when Roger Williams was seeking another place to be, because he kind of encountered some of the same things that he had encountered that led him to come to North America from Massachusetts. He came here, and he could have been turned away. He could have been robbed or murdered or looted or just disappeared. But it wasn't. He was given space from here to there, from the top of Nootakonkin Hill, right there. And those folks that gave him that space to exist and to be, have descendants that are still here, that are still fighting for their rights to have their space from here to here. So part of remedy is telling their stories, simply telling the stories of people who don't necessarily have always the ability to be seen on the scale that I felt I could try to afford the situation, like try to bring a platform and tell these stories, tell the stories of the descendants of pretty much this colonial experiment, as many as I could find. There are many more, there are many communities. Everybody wasn't represented in Remedy, but individuals that I thought were very noteworthy and very matter of fact, very honest about their identities. Individuals that I had seen doing the work of curating already in the community. And these folks, I have already seen them make their chops, like really earn their keep. And there's no one making them do any of this. They're doing it, and say, even if there's some, somewhat of a business or career to it, they're doing it not for that. I've seen them work in and out, and so I felt like I needed to tell some of these stories, and I had to approach the idea of commemoration as opposed to the monolithic. I wanted to approach it in a living way, in an active, vibrant way, to where we're not commemorating the lives of someone and they're just completely, but they're actually living here. And you can actually hear them tell some of their own stories. And we can actually see these folks in a light that we might never have seen them through the opportunity that's, been afforded to me. So I wanted to approach commemoration in a certain way that felt more real to me. And I wanted to approach the opportunity to talk about that remedy and redress and repatriation through the stories of the folks that are involved. And that's was pretty much my criteria and the way that I wanted to approach it all. And I felt like it needed to be seen in real time, like in living color, the best way possible that I could do that. And I thought that that would be through film. And so I have a background in independent filming. I've held, like, I've had a web series and I've done multiple media for a lot of different folks, but my background is in this media, and I know the power of that image and the power of hearing the voice of someone, say who they are. And I thought that more of that was needed, more of individuals being able to tell their stories and be heard, and it not be one of those censored situations.
Okay, I'm gonna jump back into that a little bit, actually. Can you elaborate on, and so this is before we went into the work itself, right? This is when you had conceived this idea, decided that, like, there were these types of people that you wanted to show up here. So without naming any names, unless you actually want to, what type of work or what type of artistic expression did you have in mind that would actually give us this idea of remedy that you're talking about? And for any of you who might be in here, listen closely, we might be talking about you, but let us know.
Well, the kind of expression that I see when I see someone being authentic to themselves and it isn't necessarily valued by everyone sticks out to me. Values based kind of creation sticks out. And so, like, for example, I see the theme of love in the work of Savinar Alexander. And to me, love in all its forms is the purest language because it's the language of the Creator. So the purest form of love to me is the sunlight, and it is the river. The sunlight gives of itself, and the river flows. It doesn't seek to eliminate itself from being absorbed by any one being. The river doesn't pick who it flows to, it lets everyone drink of it. And so that theme of love I saw expressed visually in a certain way without words. And so there's the value of bringing his work. And each one of the folks that are in Remedy show these different kinds of values that I'm thinking that we need to talk more about. Like, for example, just looking at the fact that there's wampum bead belt making still going on in our community. And that, you know, if you know American history or you've studied some of it, you understand that like our form of government, our way of doing things came from what the settlers encountered, and they encountered probably something close to what the idea of democracy is. Even though there was order to that, there was confederations, and that was formed in that terms of that agreement, that commemoration to that was formed in belts that were beaded in wampum and in, you know, other forms depending on where it was. So that's still going on in our community, and that these belts actually mean something and they're actually telling a story. That was incredible to me, and that the crafting of this work traditionally is still going on. I felt like that needed to be talked about. And like I just said, no one thinks about my Antonomi's grandsons or granddaughters, or Canonicus's grandsons or granddaughters. So I felt like that needed to be spoken about. And and like with City Micah, he works on drums, and he does these festivals where he's showcasing kind of a fusion, African identity in music, but in a fusion too, collaborating with many other kinds of musicians. And I had visited him, and I had sent him other drummers who needed to reskin their drums, and he could reskin their drums. They didn't have to be a djembe. And to me, that was like, wow, that's providing value to the community, doing festivals, showcasing the culture, but he's also contributing in that way to where he's healing. I mean, because it's like, to me, drums are alive because they come from things that were alive and they make sound. So it's like he's still contributing that life into the community. And I go one by one. Everyone has an individual story, but I felt a certain, I guess it was a certain frequency, a certain dynamic, and a certain flow to the folks that I profile. Plus, you know, I did the 2018 PVD Fest. I did a fashion show at the back of City Hall on a stage there. And I did a stage, and I called it Areito, like a PVD Fest fashion show. And the person that curated that, they gave me that opportunity. His name was Daryl Black Eagle Jameson. And I showcased indigenous, you know, clothing and designs and redesigns also kind of for the climate. I mean, and some of the first times that I was able to do solo situations where I was talking about my culture and doing oratory and also showcasing art were given to me by Shea Rivera years ago, 7, 8 years ago. You know, so I had, like, pretty much with everyone, I had a meaningful exchange and moment with, you know, and I really felt like we really needed to commemorate the situation that was going on with the Del Pasado al Futuro mural, which is on the Garaje parking structure downtown behind the municipal court, like the family court building. I felt like that was a moment because, some people might look at it and just see a moose, but the understanding is that this is the territory where the moose water, or where the moose used to water, and this is an Aboriginal concept, because really you don't see it now, but it's a concept and a way of defining and giving title and name to the land, and so I felt like that needed to be showcased, and the fact that those artists are from Philadelphia but came here and put the work in, and then are actually chose to bring other artists from our community to hire them to work on this, 6 month long or 4 or 6 month long installation of art. I felt like that needed to be commemorated. And so some of those artists are great artists, like Aganza and Isanel, which is in Poiesis, is also part of that. But there's just great experiences across the board of meaningful exchange, which helped me to form that idea.
Hey, Melaine.
Hey.
So I'm gonna bring the same question back to you. As you were thinking about Poiesis, when you formed it, what types of expression came to mind? If you want to name folks, you can do that. But if not, you can just talk about the types of work that was you felt inspired by. You were putting that as you were putting that idea together.
Honestly, I really try, as I said, kind of when you asked the previous question, I really try to approach the open call, the call for art process, and the recruitment process with a blank slate for the most part. I had made some initial studio visits. So the original title for the exhibition was Poiesis, Street Culture and the Art of the City. The original idea was to think about street culture artists, and that has a very broad term and broad principles. And so typically when people think of street culture, they think of graffiti and they think of public art, but that is not all encompassing. And so street culture, which are some of the main themes of the exhibition itself, incorporate the aesthetics of the quotidian, which is the art that happens in everyday life, the politics of public space, the materials that we use, location, the scenery, the environment, the landscape in general, ephemerality, as I mentioned, the kind of fleeting notions of life, the momentary parts that we can't always capture, and the impact, the social impact of city art itself, and of street culture. And so as I went through the process, I realized that poiesis by itself was a sufficient term, and I didn't want to necessarily title the exhibition in a way that would provide a preconceived notion as to what folks were going to see ahead of time. Specifically as street culture and the art of the city, or city art, public art, already kind of have these definitions that many people in our world are very attached to and very familiar with in a very specific context. So I'd say I was mostly looking for Providence-based artists, folks who are proud to be in Providence, to work in Providence, who love Providence. I went on a couple artist visits, to be transparent, and the works were amazing. They were landscapes, they were photographs by artists who were based in or worked in Providence, but didn't love Providence. They felt like Providence didn't really have much to offer as a creative capital. They don't know what made it richer than a place like New York City or Boston. And so part of my selection wasn't just about the artworks that you see, but it was about the artists themselves and their personal stories and narratives. I wanted artists that would scream Providence from the rooftops, people who have 401 tats, people whose work, people who are very bold and loud and proud about it. Because that's what I see on a daily basis, is how much folks love coming from here, who love Rhode Island, who don't have a negative thing to say other than something that they would actually say to the mayor, to the governor. You know what I mean? So I wanted people who are very passionate about place and about space. So I think that for me was probably the number one criterion. And then everything else I allowed speak to me. So I'm looking at, okay, some of them provided artist bios as a part of their open call submission, or I just had tea with folks for hours. So one of the artists that I did not know prior to this process, but who I would consider a friend now, is Umberto Crenca, Providence celeb, local hero, legend, clearly. And I met him through word of mouth. I shot him an email and I was like, hey, look, I'm trying to put something together. It's something commemorating Providence, what it is, what it has been, what it can be. I'm feeling a bit of a retrofuturism happening where you have young artists that are looking back to the past to create a future, and you have older artists that have been here who already have their principles kind of in the seat in the back of their pocket, who want to continue to call forth the history that they helped create. And if those of y'all who know Bert, he's a rough and tough type of guy and didn't know me from anything. And so I show up, he's like, come to my house. I'll let you know more about me, about AS220 and the history that I helped found. But like, give it to me straight. Like, what are you actually trying to do? Is this something where you're trying to develop a platform for yourself? Is it something that sounds like a good idea that you just think should be done? Like, why you? Why do you need to tell this story? And I was telling him that I feel like there is a volcanic kind of magma lava thing happening here that isn't necessarily my story to tell, but it's something that I recognize. And I did receive a platform through the Providence Biennial, received a certain resource, a certain support, a certain money that I want to give back to the artists and help them tell the story that they have already been writing for, centuries, or at least within this context. I was thinking 1970s, 1980s forward, around the founding of AS220 and what has emerged from like that kind of punk aesthetic, the kind of weird Providence ethic that's been here for at least 50 years. And so I'm telling him where I'm coming from. I'm telling him about my interest in surreality, and he's just like, yeah, kid, like, this is good. So I've developed relationships with people who not only just love Providence, but through their particular style and their particular technique have been able to show that not all artists here are actually invested in a certain status quo mentality and in a type of elitism when it comes to the way that art is defined and the way that art is presented to public audiences. That some folks, many of us, are really just interested in the stories people have to tell, their traumas, their pains, their difficulties, those frustrations, the things that you actually don't get a picture of in all artworks when you do come face to face or have that first confrontation with the artistic piece. And so I'm looking for, what I looked for were artists who had their own poiesis in their artistic story from start to finish. The only rare piece of graffiti type work that I had was Archie Rhodes, who actually had been a public artist, a muralist, a graffiti artist for most of his entire life, and decided, actually, I want to be a canvas artist and I want to work with acrylics, and I still want to work with spray paint, but just in a different way. And so although I said, I don't really want to take pictures of murals and put them in my exhibition, I don't want graffiti to be the featured spotlight of the exhibition, because I don't necessarily want people to become beholden to this idea that all street culture and all raw self-expression has to do with graffiti. It did have a place in the exhibition based on who Archie was, what his story was, what his values were, and what he was trying to do with the future of his career, coming from a past as a graffiti artist. So in a very roundabout way, the major values that I was looking for, as I said before, were raw passion, were authenticity, and a certain transgressive attitude as to what art needs to be or what art must be, according to some other types of curators, to people who actually translate meaning over the voices of the artists or over the artwork, people who think that curating means, let me tell you what it is and what it's always been, instead of, this is a changing thing. It's all up for interpretation. You're allowed to challenge what I have to say, what any of the artists have to say. Your interpretation of it may not even be what the artist gave you. And I think that's what the beauty of it is. So it's kind of seeing the beauty in the mundane, the everyday, the quotidian, and kind of getting a glimpse of the things that you probably would not have expected if you came to an exhibition about Providence culture, because of all the different communities that we happen to walk in and through. So it's really just about kind of the fluidity of definition, and about just embracing the things that are both familiar and unfamiliar, and kind of blurring the lines between good art, bad art, etc.
Thank you for that. Actually, that makes me think of something. You talk about this fluidity and things changing. I think about paradigm shifts. You speak about the conversations you were having with Archie, or decisions about that work. In this time, I speak to this as a board member, in this time putting this together with you two, I can't stress to the rest of you about how many conversations we had about decisions and how much feedback you all got from each of us, each of the board members, about whatever decisions you were going to make. one of the things that we thought about as we went into this was that we were open to paradigm shifting, right? When it comes to curating, when it comes to what work deserves to be shown and how it will be shown. And so something that happened through this year was that we got to see that every decision you two made was intentional, because you had to explain it to multiple people every time you did a thing, right? All the way up to the install week. There were things being installed, and then myself included, and the rest of the board members, we were coming up and asking, like, tell me about this decision. Oh, okay, I see where you're going with this. Let me back up and mind my own business. But every time there was something that we were trying to check out and see, like, why is this thing happening in this way? And I can attest to everyone here and anyone I've spoken to about the show that everything was done for a particular reason. You all had a vision. It was something that you made happen that you knew was different than the norm. So I'm gonna start with you, Melaine. Can you talk with us about a decision that you made, or any decisions you may have made that you knew was outside of the norm? You knew would probably have some pushback, but there's a particular reason you did this. Can you talk about that type of decision making when it comes to this? You know, a lot of people are going to see this and have questions. You talk about that experience.
Yeah, I mean, the first one that comes to mind is Big Nazo and Arminio Pinquet. I got a lot of pushback about including Big Nazo creatures in the exhibition. I love them. Some of the feedback I got was that they're ubiquitous. They've been everywhere. Everybody knows, what Big Nazo is. They're always in Providence. They're always in the streets. They scare some people. They make me nervous. And those are the reasons why I wanted them in the show. They're not the most beautiful things you've ever seen. Some of them are falling apart. The works that were in the exhibition were archival pieces that Arminio, the founder of Big Nazo, hasn't brought out in years. And for me, as Tapia already mentioned, for me, in terms of many of the works, they're living history. They are about street performances. They're about moments that can't be recreated. They're about that initial emotional impact, whether it was fear or was delight or it was joy or it was, okay, let me try to explain to my child what exactly they're seeing here because I don't even know myself. And a bit of it was that retrofuturism. And if you've ever talked to Arminio, he's very big into surrealism. He's very big in kind of, let's bring the ugly to fruition and see how many people we can make smile from it. The bizarre, the kind of grotesque, the extraterrestrial that in many ways, especially folks who identify as being kind of weirdos, they can relate to those type of things. They can relate to, these kind of abnormal oblong shapes with weird voices or just silent in general, creating a personality that I think we can kind of all relate to. It was something that I was very firm on, that it needed to be in the show because it is a certain Providence character, or at least a New England-based character that a lot of folks have seen and that they can remember at PVD Fest, that they've actually taken photos with at one point or another. And then if you talk about Arminio and his work in Providence, he's worked at Brown, he's worked at RISD, he has become a legend in his own right in this space. And so I'd be remiss not to include him because of a couple, lemons, who are just kind of like, well, it's not my favorite thing. And I think part of what Poiesis is about is everyone might find something that's their favorite, and they also might find something that they're just like, I don't even know why this is here. I don't know why the curator chose this, or I don't know why the curator put it this way. And I'll be around after this, so if you have one of those things and you want to talk to me about it, by all means, I have a reason. But my hope was that of all the different communities that came to at least the Poiesis side of the exhibition, people would see that there's something here that's actually not for me, that I actually can't make sense of. And there's nothing wrong with that, because I bet there's a couple other pieces that are right along your alley that you're like, this is what actually good art is to me, or this is what, reflects my story. And so that's just one like glaring one that I can think of. I'm like, man, people keep giving me the business about this, but it's going to be in there. So, yeah.
Thank you for that. All right, Tapia, same question. Talk to us about some decisions that you knew were outside of the norm, but you stuck to your guns and made sure they showed up in this work.
Well, the blurring thing for me is the use of multimedia. I know it's something that has been used. in some bigger museums, you'd expect to see a whole bunch of multimedia maybe at the Museum of Modern Art or something. But I wanted to try to take that and bring it down to the community level and see how we can do that here, how we can use that to tell stories in a way that just haven't been told. And so I think that just the use of all these TVs in one space, figuring out volumes, figuring out where the placement is and what's the flow of the exhibition, how what is the experience like for someone walking in through the front door? What is the experience like for someone walking in through Poiesis? How does this ingress and egress and just it's almost like feng shui, how does it feel? And actually the walking through of that was a big part of a lot of the decisions in the last well, of course, through installation. And everything, each piece of it was really like intimate to me. Like, and I felt like, you all know, because I maybe I didn't, but I felt like I was arguing or defending myself sometimes with different placements and different things. And it became very important to me because I felt like this is a moment and something that's going to allow me to kind of just create an environment for people and allow them to come into this environment and flow through it as they would, however they want to, but allow them to get the like a good vision of everything. Not like you're gonna walk through it. I just didn't want no one to miss anything. And as you come around, you might see something you didn't see, but it was a lot less stuff than like Poiesis. So uh, what there was a lot of was those monitors, and I kind of felt like I had to keep pushing that and defending that throughout the span of the last year, and find ways to say, well, to kind of make a commitment. Oh, I'm gonna do this, and this is gonna look good, and kind of keep egging that on till I could produce it. And then once I did, I felt like it was a new idea because I don't see it as much or done to the degree that I'm doing it in Remedy. So yeah.
Thank you for that. All right. Something that has really been here in this discussion this entire time, because it's been in the planning as well, and even in your decisions, is the idea of community, right? So something I think is really important as an artist myself is that I think a responsible curator is one that can build some form of trust, or at least like some type of relationship where uh, an artist feels comfortable lending their work to this person to express what they want to express, and they know that their story will be told and amplified through that. And that's something that doesn't really happen without spending some time with someone. Whether it's just a conversation or cup of coffee, whichever, right? So my question is, well, something that I know is that you all had to move closer into the artist community in PVD by forming those relationships with each one of these artists. To have a group that's that big and to be able to get, pretty much all of them into this space, it does not happen with enough people feeling committed to the vision that you talked to them about, and them feeling like, this is an opportunity that, is worth doing, but also something that would feel good. There's trust involved in that. So can you talk about your experience? I'm gonna start with you, Tapia. Can you talk about your experience of understanding the community as a viewer and then ultimately creating a new level of engagement by working with so many of PVD's creatives personally?
First, I seek to, and I just take this as a life value. In life, I seek to provide value first. I seek to first give. When I meet someone, I try to to establish an exchange and a dynamic of giving, because it opens the door for us to give of ourselves, give of our exchange. You know what I mean? What my value is, what my practice is, what my events are, what my life is, you know, and I try to add to it. So and I just do that in life in general. So I way before I was ever paid to do a show, I was doing free shows. Way before I was ever paid to do anything, I was doing it for free. And I went through that, and then through those free situations, I started to build value, build expectation, you know, build the kind of dynamic to where someone can depend on that. When I say I'm going to do something, that I'm actually going to do it. And I did that, you know, for years in this community. So I've done that with a lot of these artists, and I had to, in order to be different, because you know what you're getting most of the time in terms of artists dealing with each other, and it's not always, it's a lot of conflict. Sometimes there's a lot of dynamics that are like, you know, people are here for a second and they're going the next, and you know that's cool, that's to be understood. But I also feel like if we can contribute to each other's trajectories, then we can be much more value and valuable, and so that's like, you know, dynamic of groups. I want to create a group dynamic and then figure out how to leverage that into group economics. How do we do events and financially benefit all of us from this event? Or if there isn't, how does it benefit everyone involved? And I'm always seeking to put myself in someone else's position. So yeah, I had to do that over time, and that's how I established myself in the artistic community, is, you know, doing things first for free, and making it, like, for myself anyway, my standard, so good that folks are offering me money to do it, and multiple people doing it, and then it's over and over again because we've provided enough value. So that was the question, right? Like, was there a second part to that?
No, that was basically it. What did it feel like to
Yeah.
kind of like get closer into the creative?
Yeah,
community?
I'm already,
Yeah.
I'm in it, you know, and I seek to continue to do that and do it in different ways, do it in ways that I haven't before, because I realized a long time ago that there's not one PVD. If there's 3 million folks, then there's 3 million PVDs, because you get an exposure to a completely different culture, way of living, socioeconomic level, um, institutions, businesses, shops, depending on who you're with. So you might meet someone that'll take you to somewhere that's in the middle of a neighborhood that you've been to a million times that you never knew was there. And you can do that continually. And so, like, if you establish these relationships, you'll find that you start to experience completely different realities that are coinciding with each other, but that, you know, they don't touch like that. So you might have never known that this place was here. At a certain time, you can come in here and hang out, you know, or you might have never known that there were these murals over here, you know, or that there were these studios, that there were these complexes of studios with music and, you know, media, and that there was this theater in this building. You know, you'll never know unless you're exposed to that, you know. So I strive to continue to just build networks, build relationships and connections, because that tells me what's going on out there. It's how I take temperature, you know, to the world, and it also exposes me to the trends and to things that are happening that allow me to integrate that and do more with it.
Great point. Same thing for you, Melaine. What was something that you may have gained in getting closer to the PVD artist community through? You have a lot of artists in your show. So what was that like? What might have you gained in getting closer in that way?
I mean, if I could be selfish, I'd say I gained a lot of friends, which is really cool. Um, as I mentioned briefly before, I did a lot. There was a period of time, and Spencer, I'm sure you remember, where I was so tired because every single day for maybe about a month, maybe 2 months from when the open call started, I'm thinking maybe like from January to like end of March, I was just meeting with artists, whether they were accepted to the show or not, every day. You want to say, okay, we're going to go out for coffee for an hour. And then you might meet one artist that is like, who are you? Like, and who are you to me? And why are you asking me to do something for you? Where I'm sitting with them for 3 to 4 hours, like, okay, look, like, let's actually get into this. I have to tell you my entire life story. You actually have to trust me. And so now I didn't get to do that with everyone, but I got to do it with a good number of people. Like, I would say maybe at least 20 out of the 35 artists. And then the others, they know me enough. I at least had like some type of meeting, or it was some type of reference that they had of me beforehand, or some type of conversation. And I tried to host, virtual and in-person artist meeting sessions where people could get to know each other face to face, kind of get an in-person feel for how we talk and how we move, because I think that's essential. But I think one of your questions, for me, as a viewer, the question was like, how did I understand Providence in the artistic space coming to the community as a viewer? I didn't have as much time as Tapia to get to know everybody, every neighborhood, every history. And so I had to do it relatively quickly in order to at least attempt an undertaking of this story that I was trying to weave. And for me, I've always been really curious. I was the child walking through museums, like being slapped. It's like, hey, don't touch anything, And I'm like, but I want to touch everything. With the board, we had gone on a couple exhibition visits of various exhibitions just to kind of do some type of art crit or a talk back. And so we had visited one in particular at RISD Museum called Variance, and it helped us think more about accessibility in physical space and in like a mental capacity when it comes to the human experience that we all found really enriching, because either we had some critiques of it or we had some things that we wanted to applaud about it. And so I would say that just through my individual experiences and even my personal movement as a organizer with DARE, I've just got a lot of experience for, as Tapia said, all the different types of PBDs and all the different types of communities. When I first started the exhibition, I lived in Fox Point. I currently live in Washington Park. I've been coming to different cultural centers like Southside Cultural Center, trying to just network, meet with people, actually form non-networking relationships, which is talking to people, understand their consciousness, their coming to consciousness, their personal stories, and giving some of that myself. It's never a kind of one-way extractive process. So in that, and as Tapia mentioned, I can't agree with you more, a lot of that is just integrating into the space. So if you go into Poiesis, you'll see that a lot of things are spaced out, very intentional about the variance experience, which was making sure that some things are at a lower eye level, making sure that our folks that utilize wheelchairs and crutches can actually move around in a way that's accessible for them. Making sure that there's different language translations, figuring out that people speak way more languages than English at a higher frequency. There are more non-English speakers in the city than there are English speakers in a lot of ways, or non-English as a native language, as a native tongue. Thinking about our children, which as a child who was told not to touch anything, that's why we have Cole in there, the wooden sculpture that you can play with, and that's why you have the Stay Silent zine that you can flip through. There were things for me that needed to be children-oriented, people who are kind of more haptic learning individuals that can at least leaf through something, leave a message in the comment book, go see The Little Chemist about Louis' son and what it might look like for him to walk into a gallery space and actually see his father's name on the wall. Those all come from my experiences and the things that I gained from the artists that I talked to. So yes, friendship, but also what is it like to be a person that's not Melaine, and how do they need to be represented and reflected in the exhibition space?
Great point there. In the spirit of community, I want to bring this back around. We started our conversation off with you all expressing how did Providence present itself to you. And I'm sure through curating this exhibition and all your meetings, speaking with people, artists, as well as just other community folks, like you started to gain a little bit more of a profound understanding of it. Tapia, you spent more time here, so it was already pretty rich. However, in this case of being charged with like presenting something to the public, I'm wondering, how does your exhibition reflect the way you see this community now? Start with you, Melaine.
Oh gosh, back to back. A major goal for this exhibition was to help in creating a new language or to providing a kind of new language or definition. So a lot of this was an experiment in and of itself, and I mentioned it before, which is for the community of artists that I know and that I've come to know, what is Providence to us? What does it look like to these artists? What is it that we're all doing here? And so I mentioned before this kind of volcanic quality. I have this projection that in the next 3 to 5 years, Providence is probably going to be one of the most poppin' places on the East Coast. Like, I'm sure all of you here kind of feel that buzzing energy that I feel like there have been people who have been contributing to the space for years and years and years. And I think the city is very, very close to being a major cultural hub, artistic hub beyond tourism. I think there is a Providence culture in this cultural scene that is developing and has been developing that I think people are ready to kind of represent to at least the country and say, this is what Providence is, what it's about. It's not a Boston, New York conglomerate or migrant space, or it's not a knockoff of anything else. There is something that is developing here that is unique to the people and to the city and the environment. And so for me, Poiesis is kind of one point on this grand timeline of this undercurrent of folks saying there was a period of time where a lot of contemporary artists from all different communities were trying to kind of put a lasso over what it is we're doing, and we're slowly coming together and figuring that out. What warmed my heart right before this talk was quickly just kind of leafing through the Poiesis specific guest book and seeing people say, this gives a nice kind of picture of what a little bit of Providence culture actually is, or I've never felt more seen than I have in this exhibition representing my city. And for someone who's not from here, that is really what I was aiming for, which is folks saying, I couldn't really put my finger on it before, but now that I'm seeing this, whether it was a knockout project or if it was just kind of like a 5 out of 10, it's 1 inch closer to us figuring out how we want to, what names we're calling ourselves. So what is the definition for the types of culture that we're presenting? And I'm very proud of that. So I would say, I personally don't think I'm the one to say that this is what Providence culture is or this is what Providence art is, but I know that there are artists and that there are creatives and makers that are here that are like, this exhibition actually helped me figure out my process and my naming process better than I had prior to its presentation to the public.
Good. Tapia, same question. How do you think your exhibition reflects how you see this community?
Well, I think it reflects how I see the community because it shows the folks that I see practicing relentlessly in this community. So it shows the stick-to-itiveness, I would say, and the meaning for the practices for each artist. And I feel that each of the artists is actually on an upward trajectory. So it's not the end all be all for them. It's not the end all be all for our community. And it's just like Melaine was saying, yes, there's like veins of lava flowing right now. And what happens here influences what happens in the rest of the region. You know, when you say Providence, you're talking about Providence, but it's actually the Providence metropolitan area, which is several cities that are actually in the Providence metropolitan area. It even reaches into Massachusetts. So it's actually a bigger demographic. And so what happens here gets reflected. And I feel like it's always been that way. One of the first places to really have thick hip hop culture was Providence, right? Like ever since from the beginning, from the 70s, there's legendary b-boys in this community. When I say b-boy, I mean break dancers, right? And I say, okay, well, that's part of the urban scene too. That's urban art. And though we didn't have any b-boys in the exhibition, they're in the community and they're going to keep doing things. But we see that there's a lot of stuff going on in the community. And this has been influential as in every movement that happens. But the culture that's adopted here will be adopted by, many of these other cities. A lot of things that people come here, they go into their communities and reflect all around New England, and not just New England, because there's a lot of folks that are coming from all over the world because of the institutions that are already serving the community here as far as education, because of the industries and it's. I just see clearly how also companies use the Providence metropolitan area to create their marketing. You get a lot of beta testing and marketing testing for a lot of different products here. Um, and that goes as far as music. They determine whether something's, worth investing into through the radio play here for many years. So yeah, I'm feeling like I reflected what I saw in terms of the deeper side of what I was seeing. And I was trying to reflect Providence in ways that maybe it just hasn't been done before. One of the things that kind of I felt like emerged is this idea of one community supporting another community, and I felt like that kind of emerged in Remedy in kind of ways because I had featured Savanara Alexander as a representative of the Khmer Southeast Asian community, but then also at the same time, Aganza took a trip to Southeast Asia and also wanted to represent for that community because she has meaningful relationships in the community. And so she wanted to do that with the commemoration of a painting of a loved one from the community. So at the same time, it's like some folks thinking that community doesn't have as much representation in a lot of the art scene. But then here we see practitioners that are of the community and also folks that are not of the community, but that appreciate the community, lifting up, that fact. And there's also, many others in Poiesis also that are from the same community. So I feel like we're repping for each other. And that work, is done right now, but also is in the curators that are in the audience that will see and might have been thinking about. And now it will continue to play out like a wave, and so it's an ongoing thing. We represent the most effectively we can, but we don't know what's going to happen tomorrow or what any one of the communities may come up with. But these communities are feeding from each other in the artistic community, from seeing these things. And so this is what's creating tomorrow. And I feel like, in the next 4 to 5 years, I feel the undercurrent and like, the platform is being raised and a rising tide raises all ships. So, thankful for Providence.
I love that idea of you two speaking it into existence, that this place will, become this thing that is already buzzing. I feel it too. Something that you both talked about, and this is our last question really quick before we open it up for our audience to ask some questions. Something that's beautiful about the way both of you have dug into the community to get to know the artists, the way they see it, and help to amplify those voices through their work, is there's an element in the show that is in both shows that kind of has a if you know type feeling, right? Like if you're from here, it's like, oh, I know exactly what that is, or like you said, someone being like, oh, I feel seen in this show in some kind of way. And you being in the community as long as you have, you knew exactly what type of things to place there. So being that this is a show that has gotten a lot of attention since it opened, what would you say this show expresses to those who may not know Providence that well? I'll start with you.
I think that it expresses that Providence is like knowing itself and telling its stories through the practitioners and through these artists. I think that it shows that there's a growing, a burgeoning scene in terms of cultural revival. And you might never know if you weren't, in tune with any of the creative communities. and even just beyond the creative community, like, cultural scenes. Like, you might never know if you don't spend any time in these neighborhoods, but it's bubbling and it's reaching outside of the neighborhoods. It's building, and as it builds, it brings in opportunity. So, I feel that the more that we choose to connect within each other, to support our organic areas and organic communities and build relationships that are right in front of us to build. You walk by some people almost every day and you never have a conversation with them. You never actually know that person or even know that they are this incredible artist or this jewelry maker or this printmaker. You have no idea. But you might say hey to them. Hey, how you doing? How you doing? But nobody ever says how they're doing. So I'm hoping that that's the kind of thing that will be overcome, and it will be built more as far as the connectivity, the interconnectedness of our community, and that as we build this will afford more opportunities, because there are tons of opportunities, and like Melaine was saying, you don't even know that, like, you're in a silo, like you don't know you're in your own little bubble, until you meet somebody that's living a whole other dope life that you never heard of, and now you're like, oh, okay, well, I want to know. I'm ready to leave Providence. I'm tired of this. And you don't see there's people around here that is doing great things, that there are events that you could go to, but you don't. There's things happening that you never give the value to, and then you complain about it, and then you think you're going to run to New York or to Boston and change something. And pretty much you see people end up coming back. And then now you're experiencing it in a different way after you had the context of experiencing somewhere else. So yeah, we want to give Providence, our city, and our collection, our specific slice of America, its due, and show that, it's even if there's all this division in society and polarization, with each other, we support each other here. We're creating an artistic industry that, like, really didn't exist in that way, and we're doing it in a lot of different ways. And so, if you come around this area here, some folks have never been to the steel yard, or never been to a farm fresh, and they don't know that there's, like, these craft and art shows, pop-ups that are going on all the time. So just the more we talk and the more dialogue we have, and the more we cross those boundaries, I think the better it is for everyone's quality of life. So that's what I'm trying to impart.
Same question. What does your show express to those who may not know this place that well?
I mean, Providence is popping, right? Like, no, it is popping. But also, I kind of really said it better myself. There's a deep history here, way more than meets the eye. And for those who don't know, hopefully the exhibition helps them discover a little pocket of the city that is new to them, that is fresh, that is unfamiliar, and has them kind of let down their guard, kind of open their boundaries, kind of think a little bit differently about their own preconceived notions about whatever art is, whatever community is, whatever their values in and of itself. And especially as it parallels Tapia's remedy, it shows that in two spaces, there are completely two different understandings of what Providence looks like, the values that we hold close to us. I mean, honestly, Tapia and I have a lot of the same shared values, but even then we decided to highlight and to specify the ones that were meaningful to us and the ones that most saliently came to our attention. And I think a show like this, two exhibitions in one, shows what deserves commemorating and shifts the idea of what commemorating a thing, an idea, a person, a place even is. So for those who came to Providence for the first time, they'll be able to see that there's a lot of movement here, and it's not going to stop anytime soon. And it's not a sleepy New England town. It's actually quite boisterous and colorful and lovely and contradictory and crazy, and has a past that some might be ashamed of, but a lot of us also lean into it because there's a future ahead of us that, is worth pursuing.
Those are the end of my questions. I just want to tell you all that this has been an amazing experience talking with you. I could talk to you two all day. Like, I just love hearing from you all. Something about this process, I learned so much about what you all care about, your interests, and how strong you are when it comes to the things you believe in, but also how much care and delicacy and intention that you all have for the decisions you made outside and the decisions you make in life. So it's just been such a blessing and a privilege to know you all in this way and to have this conversation. So you all give these two a hand, please. All right, so we left it open. There's some questions. We can have questions from the audience. Are we using this mic over here? Let's see.
I got a mic. Anybody? Questions?
Use this one. Walk around like Oprah.
Do I get a card? Hi, Melaine. Hi, Tapia.
Hi.
Hi.
Hi, Spencer. Thank you guys for opening up this conversation. My name is Maria, and this is a question for both of you, which is you have two exhibitions that are part of the same show. And I'm wondering how, if there were decisions behind how to harmonize the two shows existing within the same space. Is there synergy building off of one another?
Okay, I'll take the first piece, or just say my piece. I feel like there was a lot of building and a lot of conversation to how they're going to interact, and thinking of the viewer's experience. Layout, we had extensive conversation about that, and I have to just thank the members of the biennial board, Jeff and Neil. Like, we had multiple meetings where we would come and sit around the diorama that was made out of foam core and said, this is where, and it had individuated every wall that was available, every platform, everything that we knew of. And we moved that around all over the space, like, for weeks, trying to figure out how this is gonna work, how that is gonna work, how someone's gonna walk in from this side and that side, and how close, these two entrance walls here, we did that, moved it around. Is this fine over here? No, maybe we should invert it. Maybe we should bend it the other way. And we put a lot of thought into those kinds of things. And we also did have some crossover to some of the concepts. So when we were talking about imagery, like protest imagery, we had a bunch of conversation about this is gonna blend together this way, because this is kind of a record of this experience for these protests at this time. This is another individual's kind of record of what happened and how it looked and how that rolls over to each other. So there was a lot of conversation about how to bring that together, and we had other ideas that we had put a lot of thought into, but that really, when it came down to practical application, didn't make it. There was this concept of using these two colors and having that serve almost like as a legend to where things are located and how to navigate the space, almost like it was a RIPTA kind of schedule or something. Like, we had all these, and we had a lot, but everything didn't make it to the end show. But I think that it came together well. We were afforded the space and just the license to be able to rub up on each other up to this point, and then say, hold on, no, okay, you don't like that, right? just have an ongoing conversation and interaction with it, so that it became what it did.
I think that pretty much answers it. We had a lot of work, regardless of the number of artists. Y'all have seen the exhibition. There were a lot of pieces. So we had numerous moments of anxiety where we're like, we don't know how this is going to fit. We don't know where this is going to go. We don't know if this is going to make sense. The difference between the two exhibitions, how we're going to divide everything up. But it worked out well. Tapia touched on it mostly, but yeah, harmony between the two exhibitions were a priority throughout, and trying to both make it seem like a cohesive project, which is curating commemoration. How do we highlight the curatorial component, but then also pay respect to each individual curator's unique vision?
Hi, my name is Bob. I don't think, is this working?
There we go. You just pointed to it.
Oh, okay. I don't have a question. I thought I did, but I really don't. I just want to say that I've been living in Providence for over 30 years, and it really warms my heart to be a part of this conversation. I am honored to be here with Tapia and Melaine, and to see these young curators kind of taking on the baton, if you will, and moving the art scene in Providence, which I also agree with. It's a very active art scene. I've always thought that. But to see that it has a future, that it is being stewarded into the future by you guys and people like you. I know Gonza's here, so I'll walk up there. And I know there are many other young artists in the audience as well, and young artists who are not here that you've been working with. So it warms my heart. I'm honored. I'm very happy to see that this is happening.
Thank you, Bob.
I hope so I don't so much have a question as I do a statement. Katapatush, which is to say thank you in the original language of these lands, for doing what needs to be done. I think that there's always a conflict here in this city when you're talking arts and culture. You have what people want Providence to be, and then what Providence actually is. And when you're dealing with the people and what they want Providence to be, it always seems to be two extremes. You have the ones who want to hold on to the nostalgic sort of stuffies and beaches and, that sort of Providence. And then you have the ones who, as Tapia alluded to, see something somewhere else and like, oh, we should do that here in Providence. But so often they skip past what Providence is. And Providence is beautiful. Providence is diverse. Providence is artistic. It is indeed the creative capital. And I think what you all have done with your, I don't want to call it exhibit, experience here, is helped, I think, in the minds of a broader audience to understand that. We don't need to wish for the past and try to reduplicate what was before because things aren't good now. And we don't need to look other places to figure out how we can do what they're doing here. We just need to pay attention to what's going on and pay attention to who's here. And as Tapia said, value them. And as Melaine said, understand that Providence is popping. People come from other places and there's something about this place that draws them back. And then people leave this place thinking they're gonna go find something better, and something draws them back. And if I may say, that's been going on in this place since before European contact. This was the place where all of the nations came because it was right on the bay. You had, all of the water, all of the fish. Nations would come from all around to this space to be here. And you all are tapping into that again. So I take my hat off to you both for the fantastic work that you've done. And I'm challenging everyone in this room to tap into this energy that they've exposed to us all. We don't need to go find what is gonna make Providence Providence. It's already Providence. How are you all tapping into that and helping others to understand that? And I'll end my words with this. Katapatush Uchi Wuni Mosquito. Thank you very much for the good medicine. It is greatly appreciated.
This is another comment. So I wanted to touch on the word poiesis that Melaine chose for the exhibition or her section. I didn't know that word. I didn't know how to say it. You can attest to that. I didn't know how to say it until tonight. But when I did see the exhibition was coming up, I immediately went to go look it up. And I was just like, wow, like the Google says, like, you know, something that is being created that has never been before. And I was just like, wow, like that excited me more about the exhibition. I said, I have to be at this. I'm a painter, and that's what painters, artists do. They create from nothing, you know? So when that's like, you touched on like her saying like, oh, the word is too inaccessible. It's like, that's what an artist is. That's what people are. We are born from, you know, where we come from. You know, no one knows how we get here, but we're here. You know, it just was amazing to like really see that word and like have to learn it myself. Like, and that's what everyone's doing like all the time. Like everyone's studying, you know, everyone, especially in Providence, all these institutions, you know. So I was like, when you said like, oh no, it's too inaccessible, I was just like, but people are curious enough to like see like, what does this world mean? Providence. I was born in Boston. I was raised in New York. My new love is Providence. Like, I've been here. I've been here for about 14 years, and I probably won't leave, you know? Like, I adore this city so much. I have made so many connections. Every connection that I've made has been made with, like, everybody that I know knows each other. Like, this place is so familial, and I just think it's so intimate, people's connections and networking here. And I think that, you know, people really support each other here. Like, you can go to Boston, you will see how icy cold it is as it gets in the winter. That's the same spirit as the people there sometimes, you know. New York, there's a saying that, like, you know, the fish is like in the ocean. It's like, I want to get to the ocean. Where's the ocean? It's like, you're in the ocean. You know, New York is so big and so, like, you know, just covers a lot of territory. It's like you can get lost in it all and like be in one day and out the next day. But you know, Providence is just like, it's so easy to like, I probably saw you like talking to one of the artists one time at like the Korean barbecue. Like, I didn't say anything to you because I was just like, I don't think she remembers me. I came to the exhibition, she knew my name. I met Millette, like, I'm Millette. I have a friend named Millette. Very, very unique M names, Melaine and Millette. But I met Melaine at a Buddhist introductory meeting at Brown campus. She came to it, she was just interested. You know, we hung out a couple of times. And then we just lost contact, and I haven't seen her ever since, you know, but I follow her on like the socials and stuff. But I just always just looked up to her, you know. I was just like, wow, she's doing really great. Like, she's doing really great things. But yeah, like I think that, you know, this exhibition meant so much to me because like Big Nassau, I saw my favorite picture was Big Nassau with the little kids in Southside Providence. I had never seen Big Nassau outside of downtown. And like, to see Big Nassau, like the little black child, I was just like, that's so amazing that those paths cross, you know? So, yeah, this exhibition was amazing, and that was my comment and statement and dissertation.
Thank you so much. Hello. My question is for Tapia. I am interested by what you shared your experience of being in the military previous to this. And just because I know like the culture between like a creative culture and the culture of something like that can be very drastically different, I'm wondering how that experience maybe helped or hindered your creative path, or how that kind of has influenced within your life.
Well, my experience in the military helped me in a lot of ways. It really helped me. The biggest way is it made me appreciate the time that I had. It made me appreciate life. It made me appreciate my own liberty and my own freedom. Because in order to serve the country, you have to become a slave. That's what you do. So when you take that oath, as soon as you take that oath, when you're in the MEPS, right? Like when you the first day or whatever, as soon as you take that oath, the world changes because everyone addresses you differently. When you walked in, you were a citizen, you were respected. As soon as you take that oath, you're private and you have no respect. You have to earn everything and you just, you cease to be. And then you go in and they shave your hair and you go through a process of breaking you down so that you can be built back up in an image that is strong and that will do whatever needs to be done at a moment's notice. So just the experience of the military helped me to appreciate what I already have, to look at my own life as valuable. Because quite honestly, when I came in to the military, I didn't look at my life as valuable. And I was willing to sacrifice it for anything that seemed more valuable than me. So after the time in the military, after going through all of the things that I've gone through, I just decided, like, once I'm done with this experience, I'm not gonna waste time. I'm not gonna, you just gotta live life, but I'm not gonna procrastinate, right? I'm not going to waste my life, because I could die at any moment. I've already gained a very high consciousness and understanding of my mortality. What do I do with it? What do I dedicate my time to? And I it's like hair. Like I couldn't wait to get out of the military so I could appreciate my hair again. So I could actually, I wanted to get haircuts, but it was like turned into, I don't want to cut my hair anymore. I want to grow my hair. I want to do creative things with it. I don't just want to die. I don't just want to be done with it. I want to develop it and go experience and do things that I never did because I was forced to, kind of through the military, through the experience of going to combat and warfare and having to be in places and just, do things that I didn't always really agree with everything. And it was like, well, why should I be doing all these things and compromising myself always for some other system, So it really helped me to appreciate that. And it gave me a contextual understanding of what real freedom is, what liberty, like what that really means. Because, when you have it, you have no idea what it means. You talk about it all day. If you've never been locked up in a cell or forced to do things, like you have no context or concept of it because you already have it. You just take it for granted. So yeah, the military did help me to just really appreciate my life, and also with a work ethic. I had thought I knew how to clean before I went into the Army, and I got fired from a whole bunch of jobs before I ever went into the military. And after that, I knew how to clean. I knew how to work in a way that I couldn't have learned if I wasn't forced to do it. Forced to go through it, and then like, this ain't so bad. I actually like this. Now I make myself do hard things for no reason because it develops your character. So it helped me with kind of, learning how to decide I want to do something, execute it, and be successful in that. And so I had to appreciate the very small little victories when I was in the military. But I don't want to take too long, but so when I was in Iraq the second time I was in there, I was in a gun truck. I was a 50 cal gunner. So I was the guy that hangs out of the Humvee with the 50 cal machine gun, the 249, and the M16 or the grenade launchers and all this stuff. I'm the guy that's going to get shot at first. I'm the guy that has to put the flares up. I'm the guy that has to address everything initially. And that was very intense, but in that time when I was out there, I've been to every single post in the theater for that time, from Kuwait all the way up to Syria. And so I got to know all these places because we're constantly on missions where you're going for 16, 18 days, 12 days. You're not even getting the showers every single time. You got to do night stuff. You got it's really crazy, but I got to know all these places. And then while I was there, eventually on the missions, I started to take the Humvee and go myself to meet other friends and other commands and other things on different posts. And I just started to navigate it and do it. And then eventually, before I left, I was doing some music. And so, we did an album in combat. We released it. I was supposed to be on the show called My War Story, which was a History Channel show. But I didn't know enough about music, and they were going to send somebody out there to put me on the show. But in that time, I wouldn't have been able to, if I didn't have the art still, to get through it. But it really added a lot to the structure and kind of the regimented way of making art, and really dedicating myself to it and doing it, regardless of if I'm getting a result or not. That really helped me to, have the wherewithal to be here today. So.
We'll take one last question. Oh, there was somebody behind. We'll take two questions. You're already here.
I mean, yeah.
Okay, so we do yours really quick and we come back there.
I just wanted to know what Mel's favorite breakfast food was. Because my piece was about food in Providence, and I feel like that's how I really got to know the community.
I love me some chocolate chip pancakes. Yeah, and eggs with cheese and a side of bacon.
French toast. Yeah, that's what I like. And there's a whole nother world to breakfast spots and stuff. I know OVs and Seaplane. I don't know if you know what those places are. Anybody know what the Seaplane Diner is?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
How about OVs?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so those are Providence classics right there. Just investigate those things.
So I guess I had a question that expanded on the military question, but more about I guess economic conscription and what it means to. Obviously, you have a choice to enlist, right? You were a civilian, then you were enlisted based on your decision to better your life. But could you, I guess, talk to, I guess without context, it's hard to explain, but I know there's a lot of communities that are linguistically invisible, but have provided networks of care and mutual aid outside of the colonial structure for as long as the colonial structure exists, such as the intermarrying of the Cape Verdean community with some indigenous communities here. And they're often conscripted into the military without a frequency of choice or appearingly so. Whether you join a vernacular community that has the potential to damage your life, or you join a giant military industrial corporation. What is it that art could do now that you've served that time, to advocate for a direction away from that conscription? Or do you think that, like, I don't really know how to phrase the question, but how do you not get stuck going in the military when your only other option is worse?
Everything is choice. I didn't choose to go into the military initially. I chose after I ran into the fact that I couldn't get into any colleges. Even though I thought well in high school. I didn't have all the advanced placement for what I wanted to do, and pretty much thought of the military as a way out um, from ending up in jail. Quite honestly, a couple years after I joined the military, pretty much everyone that I was around was either in jail or murdered. So that's why I joined the military, because it was one or the other for me at that point in my life and my mindset. That exists anyway. It's never going to stop existing. See, colonization is not reversible. There is no reverse. There is not going to be any reversing to anything. It's all there. So, but there's just, like, we can talk about choice and everything, but there's really no choice when it comes down to any of the institutions or practices that you accept, that that's given to you. So it's an option, and it can be a good option, it can be a bad option, everything can be, but it's available, and you can do great things with it. So that's what I'll say to that. Because as much as we talk about that, I was just watching some independent media about Mexico, and how social media influencers in Mexico are being killed by cartels. And I also saw some stories about some youth who lived in a cartel-dominated city, and he just simply didn't want to sell drugs. And he was subsequently murdered and tortured for it. So as much as we want to, complain about everything, it could be worse. It could be a lot worse. And there's a lot worse things happening in a lot of places. It's not that everything's great here, but that's a whole different level, ain't it? So, I think we just have to get around people that give us breath to our minds and allow us to see what's already in front of us in a way that we haven't seen it before. Like, you got to stop looking at the box and saying that's just a box. Like, you say the word bird and you think that being is what you're saying. No, the words are like a frequency that you're trying to match what the living thing is, but it doesn't become anything. Like, you don't tell it what to do. You know what I'm saying? Like, you decide which words you use, but those words frame your reality. The way that you choose to approach it and choose to envision it and choose to feel about it creates a reality and a path for you. And I couldn't really realize that until I got out of it, and then kept having to crash my perception of myself in order to survive. Then now I could see outside of it. Now I could see options I never knew. People, I could build relationships with people that I would have never built relationships with, with those simple things of that choice. And it's not so much conscription, but it's effectively using the choices that you have in front of you. So the more positive we take it, the more power we give ourselves, and the more open we are, then the better our reality becomes, the better possibilities we have. And so we got to unlock our minds, like unlock our eyes, so we can actually appreciate what's in front of us and view everything in that way, in the most positive way. Be honest and be real about it. But I don't feel like there's as many limitations on me and on just the world as I might have felt in my younger days or in my lower consciousness days, in days where I didn't know that, you know, there was there were so many different communities here, right? Like in the days where I didn't have relationships with folks that descended from the Nanhigna, in days that I didn't talk to folks that, you know, didn't necessarily speak the language that I spoke, that didn't have any cultural ties to anything that I was tied to. In those days where I was very siloed into just my culture and my community in terms of what I was born into, then the world seemed a lot smaller. Everything seemed, you know, there wasn't as much hope because you got to go outside of that. And so as you find that, you'll find more opportunities exist and a whole reality exists that you never knew was there because you're locking yourself down, you know. So I just think we should be careful about how we think about, you know, our positive opportunities and the potentials, because the only thing that's going to manifest as far as potential is what's already inside you, what you already are at the level of, you know. So you got to keep it up, bring it up. Anyway.
Yeah, that's a curator talk, right, Charles? Really quick. Where can these folks follow what you all are doing and find your work? Websites, platforms, whatever, really quick before we get out of here.
You can follow me on Instagram at Melaine J. King. It's just my name, website in the works. I'm also just around Providence often. So if you follow me on Instagram or if you look me up and you find my email, just shoot me an email. I'd love to have tea, coffee. In person's always best, a phone call. But I am available and I think I'm pretty accessible. I don't have all the social medias, but I have one good one. So please keep in touch.
You'll see the hair.
Yeah, you'll see the hair.
You just, you know, there's a lot of different ways, a lot of people talking about things. I got websites and all that, but if you, whoever has Instagram, it's at Tapia1, TAPIAUNO and the number 1, www.tapianow.com. And from there, you pretty much can connect to everything else. As far as tribal pages, we have the Sibuko Bayamon Taino tribe, or Borinquen, and you can also find information about us and our sister federation tribes at Federation of Aboriginal Nations of the Americas on Facebook or fana.global. But, you know, the Instagram kind of feeds pretty much everything. And the website has connections to a lot of social media. So, yeah, just, you know, Google, not just Tapia, that's very common, but Tapia Now or Tapia Uno 1. That's it.
Melaine and Tapia, thank you again so much. And thank you all.
Thank you, Spencer.
Home. Thank you to the Wilbury. Thank you to Waterfire. Thank you to Providence Biennial.
Home. Mabrika. Appreciate
Thank you all.
guys.
Thanks for
Peace.
coming. You did, definitely. I think it went
Thank you.
wonderfully.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah.
Y'all did an amazing job. That was great. Like, beautiful curator talk.